I hope that looking at this commandment, number 8, Exodus 20, we're back there. I hope looking at this commandment is another reminder of our need for God and how good it is that we have Him, His character, what He's like, His grace, difference between God and us, and how amazing it is that He pursues a relationship with us in light of that difference. So commandment number 8, I'm going to read it to you, really short, verse 15, you shall not steal. You shall not steal. And I want to tell you a story. My parents being here the last couple of days has caused me to go down memory lane a bit, and I was working on this message, and I thought of the first time I was impacted by theft. I was probably like 11 or 12 years old, and I was into skateboarding for years, and there's kind of a milestone when you're into skateboarding, which is you go from like the toy store skateboard to the skate shop skateboard, and the skate shop is the more expensive version, obviously, and you build it, you customize, you buy the deck and the trucks and the wheels and everything, and it's a customized board that you pick out, you design right down to the grip tape. And so I've been waiting and waiting. Christmas came along. I got this nice, crisp $100 bill, Benjamin Franklin. And I remember, I don't know if you remember this, Mom, but we drove up, I think through the snow. We drove to Providence where the skate shop was. And I bought this board that I had my eyes on for a long time and got all the customized parts of it, brought it home, built it, was ready to use it. I think I spent maybe 2 weeks at the most skating around on that skateboard, and it gets stolen out of our garage. Yeah, I know, cry me a river. Right, Dave? Life's hard. The men's meeting last week, I told my story about my favorite hockey stick. I bought the Ray Bork hockey stick. That got stolen from me. I've had a rough life, guys. So it's small-scale stuff, right? Theft or grand theft. Oh, Jack. That's getting edited right out of this thing. Hey, at least they made it. I didn't see Toronto in the finals. Yeah, we could go for a while. Can you think of something in your life? Don't shout it out, but you think of something that was stolen from you and how you felt about it. I mean, what feelings emerge when that happens? So something gets taken from you, whether you know who stole it or not. What's it feel like? Rage. What else? Go ahead. Vulnerable. Yeah. Someone breaks into your house, it's really vulnerable, right? Someone gets into your house. Disappointment. How about the word injustice? You feel like there's just this injustice. Did you see what happened in Philadelphia on July 4th? A mob of about 60 teenagers stormed into a Walgreens there and just stole, I think they said somewhere between $6,000 and $7,000 worth of merchandise from the Walgreens. Just this mob of teenagers. And there's surveillance camera footage of it. And you can just watch these teenagers pouring in and just pouring out with all this stuff and soda and candy and chips and all. And, just to watch it, it does something to you, Theft. It's a part of life. It's an inescapable part of life. And one thing, a lot harder for us to acknowledge or identify is the fact that not only do we have things taken from us, but we actually take things from other people as well. And if you're like me, if you're a nice little, good boy, goody-goody, you've never stolen like that maybe, but maybe in small ways. I've had people confess to me, taking money from their parents' wallet or purse or stealing candy from a convenience store. People talk about, I've taken things from work, supplies from the supply cabinet at work, stealing time on the job, poking around on the internet or social media. That's stealing time from your employer. I mean, there's all sorts of other ways. We rob other people of peace and quiet, right, kids? Rob your parents of peace and quiet. Husbands and wives rob one another of time, devoting their time to one thing over here when the spouse would prefer together time. So we rob one another in those ways. So we may want to justify ourselves, make excuses for ourselves, but in reality, both are true of all of us. One, we have things taken from us. Two, we take from other people. That's That's human nature. That's the world we live in. And here's a bit of a difficult truth to consider in light of how that happens, and it happens in immeasurable ways every day in this world. God sees it all. He sees it all. And a good amount of it, he just lets it happen. I mean, you watch that surveillance video of those teenagers robbing the Walgreens, and to this point, as far as I know, they haven't caught anybody yet. Even though they have footage, it's hard to see, and as far as I know, they haven't taken anybody in. I mean, I don't know, you think about that, what's that make you feel like? To me, it's like, God, do something. You just let this happen? And you let this happen like an infinite number of times? And if we include the lesser categories of theft that I mentioned a minute ago, I mean, how do you even, it's incalculable, right? We humans by nature are takers. We take. We're consumers. We're self-justifiers. We have good reasons for what we take. I read an article someone wrote years ago about the looting and robbing that took place in Ferguson when that event unfolded. And this author of this article, the title was In Defense of Looting, and argued that it's justifiable because it's the only thing that will get the attention of the media and get the attention of political figures and so on and so forth. It's amazing what we're capable of, we humans, and how we justify, and how I'm going to submit to you that you're blind to ways that you take from other people. Don't even see it. And God sees it all. And a good percentage of it, he just lets it happen. And here's what he does. A few pretty powerful things. And it gets more powerful as we move along. But the first one is, he says, don't do it. Verse 15, do not steal. As we've been saying, the Ten Commandments reveal what life looks like in relationship with God, what righteousness looks like, what love looks like. And we've been saying it's kind of like looking at a shell of something where you see the outside, the exterior of it, but the substance of it, the substance of righteousness, the substance of life, the substance of love is something that God alone has within himself. So we who are so prone to take must receive if there's going to be any help or any hope in this area of our lives. To begin with, God says, don't do it. Don't do it. As we've done the last few weeks, especially as we look at these commandments that are sort of more horizontal in nature, interpersonal relationships, we've been looking at two applications. One being the horizontal societal level, and the second one being the vertical spiritual level. Let's think about the horizontal for a minute. They're in this growing nation. They're wandering in the wilderness. There are many opportunities to sin against one another in all sorts of ways. And God, through Moses, is giving them the law by which they are to be governed. And included within that law, we've looked at honor your father and mother, and do not murder, and do not commit adultery. And he includes here now, don't steal. They're struggling. They have limited resources. They're in survival mode. Very easy to justify taking from someone else. And so God gives severe consequences. We won't look there, but if you read throughout Exodus, you see at different times God describing what needs to happen, the punishment that needs to happen if someone is guilty of stealing. If a man kidnaps another man and sells him, then the one who kidnapped the person and sells him is to be executed, death penalty. And the one who buys that kidnapped person is to be executed, death penalty. As I've been saying throughout, this is God's way of, number one, restraining the flesh, seeking to persuade us, hey, this isn't good for you, and curbing the flesh, appealing to our sense of self-preservation to get us to not do it. And then also, along with that, he's also illustrating, spiritually speaking, you're choosing death for yourselves, and the penalty for this is death, physically speaking. So there's a death penalty in that particular case. Then there's, if you steal an ox that belongs to someone else and you're caught, you have to repay 5 oxen to replace the one. If you steal a sheep, it's 4 sheep. For some reason, I guess sheep are less valuable. So it's 4 for the 1 sheep that you stole. For some things, it's double. You got to pay back double. What does that tell you? This has also been thematic throughout this series. We've been saying, look, we hear commandments as a negative thing, a constraining thing. And the word just feels that way to us. But this is a gracious God showing us what life looks like, persuading us to see our problem, to see what we do to each other, and persuading us to not do it by saying, look, think of the consequences. You take one sheep, you got to pay 4 back. I mean, just don't do it. This is for the preservation of the nation of Israel and for their good. And we need consequences. From the time we're little, we need consequences. We need pain. That's the only way we learn. So you have in some cultures, particularly Muslim countries, if you steal, guess what happens to you? Who knows? What do they do in Muslim countries if you get caught stolen? Yeah, either a finger or your whole hand gets chopped off. I don't know, I find that persuasive. Might have kept me from stealing that gum from the Almax grocery store back in the day. That wasn't that good. Like all the other good people, I was just good at hiding. Sorry, Mom. My mom is mortified right now. So God shows us what spiritual life looks like. So let's dig into that next level, okay? The level of the vertical, this is what righteousness is, this is what love is what life is. I mean, all of that would look like this. It would look like not taking, not stealing what belongs to other people. And underneath it, like everything else, underneath it is minimizing God's value. Underneath it is violating the first commandment, which is have no other gods before me. It all begins there. We make too much of stuff and too little of God. We betray Him and we go our own way. And this is the outworking of that. This is the inevitable consequence of that. We're belittling Him. We walk away from Him. We do our own thing and we justify all these horrible, selfish types of behaviors. And Jesus, when you come to the New Testament, He digs even deeper. It's interesting, you read the Sermon on the Mount. We've been saying there's this parallel, right? You have Moses on Sinai giving the law. You have Jesus in sort of a parallel way giving the Sermon on the Mount. And he revisits these commandments. Well, this one, He doesn't explicitly reference, but He says this. He says, do not resist an evil person. If anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, let him have your coat also. Whoever forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. That's a form of theft. He's saying, He doesn't just say, don't steal. Here's what He says. You will be stolen from, and when you are, just let them take your stuff. Remember in the beginning we talked about what we feel like when someone takes our stuff, whether it's small or big? He says, just let them take your stuff. Your shirt, your coat. Go the extra mile, your time, stealing your time. I mean, if we really look at that and see that as the intent of the law and the spirit of the law, it should make us really squirm on the inside if we're paying attention. Because there's something about that feeling of injustice. This is wrong. This is mine, my property. How dare you? So as usual, what Jesus is saying, when you really listen to it, sounds kind of crazy. And the standard is impossible. The standard is truly impossible. It was read earlier, John chapter 10, where Jesus says, the thief comes to steal and kill and destroy. This is the way of the evil one, Satan. This is the way of fallen people. Steal, kill, destroy. He says, but I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. So into a world of thieves comes Jesus, who is the opposite, who gives and gives and gives, who never takes, who even allows himself to be stolen from over and over and over again throughout his life. His honor is stolen. His time is stolen. Countless ways he is stolen from. And in the end, this was mind-blowing. This is an awesome moment the other day when I saw this. I read earlier in Matthew, the Sermon on the Mount. He says, if a man takes your shirt, give him your cloak also. And I thought, man, I got to look at that scene in the end of Jesus' life. He's on the cross, and it says the soldiers took his garments, remember? Guess what those words are? Very same words for shirt and coat. And it says Jesus' shirt and his coat was taken from him. And he just lets it happen. And he's the one who could have stopped it. If I could have stopped the punk from stealing my skateboard or my Ray Bork hockey stick, Sherwood brand favorite ice hockey stick, if I could have stopped that, believe me, I would have. Jesus could have stopped it, and he doesn't. He's go ahead, take from me. And then he pays the ultimate price. His life is stolen from him. God says that was done for you. For you to see what righteousness is. For you to see what life is. For you to see what love is. For you to see what relationship with God looks like. The substance, the shell, we talked about the shell. This is the substance. And we're invited to put our trust in him, to admit that we are thieves. Even though we've cleaned ourselves up on the outside and we know enough to stay out of trouble, we're still thieves. All these subtle ways of doing it. And we have a Savior who loves us, and who redeemed us, and who forgives us. It's all washed away. The curse, the death penalty, he took upon himself so that we can know freedom. And now we're invited to walk in relationship with our Creator, remembering the essence, what's underneath stealing, and to remember his provision for it, to remember his love for us, to have our view of other people adjusted, to catch ourselves when we are taking, to have, instead of self-justification and rationalizing, just to call it what it is. Hey, this is our nature. And now there's a Christ to trust with this. So Greg often says, my relationship with people drives me to Christ. And my relationship with Christ drives me back to people. So we live in that loop. And that's what we're invited to live in, is that loop of acknowledging our condition. That's, if anything, if nothing else, I hope we are really clear about our condition. It's all of our condition, not just some of our condition, and the essence of our salvation, the gift of God to us, giving us the most amazing gift, the infinitely valuable gift. Could have protected himself, could have protected his property, could have fought for his rights, and he didn't. And that is what brought about our salvation. And God says, this is what love looks like, and I'm giving it to you because you don't have it within yourselves naturally. Wrap up with this. We live in a world of stuff, a limited amount of stuff, resources. We get to borrow it. Some get to borrow more than others in terms of how much people have, their net worth or whatever. But as I read in a book years ago, all the pieces go back in the box at the end of the game. In between, what do? We fight for stuff. Whether it's material things or our own respect or what we feel like we deserve from our spouse or someone else. We fight and fight and fight and fight and fight. And it's internally deadly, destructive, eats us alive. And we have a God who loves us. He provided for us, who showed us what love looks like, and who grants it to us as a gift. If we just look up. Remember the wilderness wanderings later on in the historical record here, they're going along, and God sends these vipers to discipline them. They're just not getting it, not getting that he is their provider. And so these vipers come along and start biting people, these poisonous snakes, and Moses crafts a brazen serpent. And he says, when it happens, do what? Look up. Just look and be saved. So we find ourselves, whether it's this, the theft, or any of the others we've talked about, the dishonor of parents, the adultery, the murderous, angry thoughts we have, whatever it is, God's just saying, just look up. No, you don't have it within yourself. You can't fix that. You don't have the antidote for the venom. You're dying. You're dead. Look up. The psalmist says, from whence comes my help? Look at the old King James in my mind. You're welcome, Sydney. See a little reference to the King James once in a while. My help comes from above, the maker of heavens and the earth. Where is his help seen most clearly? Sydney just said, cometh from above. Sorry, I mixed translations there. Touche. I shall never quote the King James Version again. Well played, Sydney. Very true. Greg's missing out on all sorts of good stuff today. He would appreciate it. He still uses the King James too. Naturally, people take, God gives. We will inevitably be robbed by men, and we will rob men. And God gives, and gives, and gives, and gives, and gives. And that's why we're forgiven and alive and free. And someday we'll be in heaven, and nobody will take our stuff anymore. And we won't be taking their stuff anymore either. I'm looking at Dave right now. I feel guilty. Dave let me borrow a smoker, and I destroyed it yesterday. That's a form of theft, probably, Dave. I literally had to call Dave this is the last thing, and then I'm done. I'm going to pray in a second, but you got to hear the story. Smoked this amazing chicken, like best chicken you ever had in your life, right, Mom? I told you it was going to be the best you ever had. Don't say otherwise. It is. So we had this amazing. I literally was pulling the last drumstick off the smoker after like 3 hours of smoking it, and this flames just erupted. Like, what the heck? So it turns out water evaporates at high temperatures for a long period of time, and grease is pretty flammable. And so this thing literally it's like this big, and it was engulfed in this flame, and I'm just looking at it. Juliana comes out. She's like, is it supposed to do that? I'm like, I don't think so. Like, Dave, is there supposed to be fire on the outside of this thing? So we got it put out. Everything's fine. House didn't burn down. And there was only one drumstick destroyed. Everything else was perfect. It was fine. I got a picture of it. Dave made me send him a picture of my food, so I sent him a picture. But I'm not posting it on Facebook. No insult meant to you if you post your food on Facebook. All right. You're welcome. All right. Can we still pray after that story? Let's pray. All right. God, thank you for your love for us. Thank you for, again, this morning helping us to look at ourselves, look in the mirror, and see who we all are. God, I pray that if we're blind to our own need in this area, if we don't see how much of a taker we are, I pray that you help us to see and to see the misery of it and to find life and forgiveness in the provision of Christ, who gave and gave and gave and gave, and who allowed himself to be stolen from over and over and over. His shirt, his coat, his life itself. Thank you for your good news. Thank you for your love for us, God. As we go today, help us to go experiencing measures of freedom and joy because of your great love and redemption in our lives. In Christ's name.